I was in a psych ward, not once, but twice, because emotional, psychological, and religious abuse. The interesting thing is it wasn't clear to me I was even in an abusive situation. How did I miss it? Was it abuse? Was it bipolar? We will go into this through later episodes, but today we're going to focus on the 8 reasons why I missed it. If you have any questions or want more information, just leave a comment or go to LiveBrighter.info. First reason why I missed it is I just call it brain damage or brainwashing. You know, I did think that I was crazy. I did have some mental challenges. I remember those mental challenges, but there is something about just being in a very bad situation and that creates this toxic situation and brain damage. It was like a well-worn path of just you're not enough, you can't keep the house clean, and you just do it this way and can't do it right. That basically made a well-worn path in my brain to a garbage dump of I'm not enough. I remember hearing about a man that was addicted to pornography and died. His brain revealed, after he died, they opened up his brain and they looked at it and they saw one big blood vessel going to a part of the brain, feeding that area. So to me, that was like, oh my goodness, we can totally rewire our brain and change it. And I'll tell you, being in an abusive situation, emotionally destructive situation for long term, it messes with your brain and we can rewire it. I also had some mental challenges that was going on. I also had my physical challenges too. There's also a very addictive side to abusive situations and destructive relationships. It's kind of a little bit like heroin. Like I spent my time working to be enough, and I was like the hamster on the hamster wheel being trained. I'd just go faster and faster, and maybe I'd get that little treat of good job, the house is clean, or get that little touch or that affirmation, and it was just like going on a hamster wheel. So basically I programmed my brain in a very toxic way. The second one was the connection with my body. I was not connected to my body at all. And so basically during my marriage of 22 years, Mark, my ex-husband, refused to talk about any disagreements. And so rather than being able to work through those things, I had to just forgive and suppress it. And basically that suppression led to a lot of pain and health issues. So I had a weak immune system. I was sick a lot. I had neck pain, headaches, allergies, ear infections, Hashimoto activations, all sorts of things. And a lot of that had to do with just suppressed pain and not being able to work through challenges. So that was one way I missed it too, was a lack of connection with my body. This third reason why I missed it was the form of abuse. Abuse has many different flavors. I would not have recognized mine because the picture I had in my head about abuse. In my mind, that was someone yelling and screaming, physically hurting someone. So I did not recognize mine. I had a friend who was in an abusive situation. I didn't even know about it for 2 years. She was a neighbor. And when she started to finally confide in me, she was talking about the mental and psychological abuse was actually harder than the physical abuse, which blows my mind. But the form that I had was actually the ignoring, the stonewalling, and that was my form of punishment and abuse, which I would not have considered as abuse. And I know now why they do solitary confinement in order to punish people or in war, because it really doesn't feel good. I'm not talking about that, I'm working through something, I need a day, let's talk about it again. I'm just going to stone cold ignore you for 6 days. You bring it up again, I'm going to ignore you another 6. So I basically got trained, but that was the form of abuse. Also, I hadn't even heard of like religious abuse and financial abuse, but there's lots of different flavors. The fourth reason why I didn't recognize I was in an abusive situation is it was my normal, and I was comparing it to others. I was in fear all the time, and I was used to it. I didn't even recognize that was a problem until a friend was telling me that was in a very clearly physical and mentally abusive relationship that she was in fear all the time. Also comparing, I'd be like, well, compared to this situation or that situation, it's not that bad. I did a lot of self-shaming, like, if I was a different person, it wouldn't bother me so much, rather than being really in tune to how I was feeling and what it was doing to me. So that was the fourth reason. It was my normal and I was comparing. The fifth reason why I missed that I was in an abusive situation is, and this is a biggie, was my family and Christian background. It used to be like just from my raising and the culture and everything, it was consider others more important than yourself. And that's actually a gross misinterpretation of the Bible, and we'll get into that later. But I also learned that suffering is considered godly, submission was right, and basically all those things had been twisted out of Scripture and was used to create an unbalance of power and thus control. And that held me captive in my abusive situation. It was a generational thing in our family. And that was a big thing to overcome. God hates divorce. So I had a lot of religious training, and then also that was used in my marriage to keep me captive and controlled. Would you like to start your Live Brighter journey with some free printable affirmation? There's nothing like reminding yourself of God's truth about you. Click the link below. The sixth reason why I missed that I was in an abusive situation is my kindness. My greatest strength and my greatest weakness. I'm easygoing, I'm nice, I'm teachable, and I really lacked boundaries. I didn't even think that boundaries were a healthy God-given thing. Me being a kind girl kind of put a bullseye on my forehead for a very messed up relationship. I was overly involved about the thoughts, feelings of others rather than myself. I learned later that that's called functional codependency, and I was a pro. The seventh reason why I missed that I was in a destructive relationship is numbing, and I numbed with busyness. I was using busyness to numb my thoughts and feelings instead of creating an awareness, because nothing can happen if you're not creating an awareness, and no awareness can happen if you're not creating some quiet time. But when I created some quiet time, it was just unnerving because I knew it was wrong. My body was telling me, I just didn't want to listen. I didn't know how to deal with these feelings in the situation, so I just kept busy. And that was easy because I had 4 children, and it was easy to avoid that thought process. So I didn't pause and reflect until I was in the psych ward the second time, and I'm like, wow, I am doing the same thing and expecting different results, and that's not working. So rather than taking the time to sit with my uncomfortable feelings, I chose to be busy, and I wasn't even really conscious about this choice. The 8th reason why I did not even know I was in an abusive situation is I didn't have the words. I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't know terms like gaslighting, love bombing, passive aggressive, stonewalling. I wasn't aware of all those terms and what they really meant. So I really didn't have the words to describe what I was going through. Then I had this basically idea in my head that I couldn't be complaining about my husband. So I wasn't really sharing honestly about what it was doing to me. And then I was in a culture that really minimized, as far as my family system, really minimized it and, really serve others and focus on that. And it was destroying me. So those were the 8 reasons why I didn't even know I was in an abusive situation. The first one, I call it brain damage or brainwashing. The second one is I really lack that connection with my body. The third one is the form, the flavor of abuse. There's lots of forms. And mine was very unique to my brain. The fourth, it was my normal, and I was comparing to other people's situation and thinking, oh, mine's not that bad. The 5th is my family and Christian background. It was basically kind of okay to be a doormat. The 6th was my kindness. It really put me susceptible to being a functional codependent and not advocating for myself or for my health or for, my future with training or for my future in raising my kids. And the 7th, numbing. Oh gosh, being busy was a great numbing agent. And then 8th is I really lacked the vocabulary or the words to even understand what was going on. I didn't understand Asperger-ish or, all of those words, functional codependency, gaslighting, all of those terms that would have been super helpful. So that was my journey, why I missed it, and how I've had to spend years to live brighter. So during this whole podcast, we're going to live brighter and hear from other real stories as well. Is there something that you completely missed, or is there something that you just don't feel so good about, where you feel shame about a past situation? First of all, I'm sorry for your pain. And I want you to know something. You did the best you could in those circumstances. Don't rethink it. It's not what if, it's what is. And I really just encourage you to have compassion on that younger version of yourself. I mean, honestly, I could go back and say, oh yeah, I would totally redo all of that and I'd be aware, but I wasn't. And so just having compassion on that younger version, because it really sucked. It really sucked going into a psych ward. It sucked making decisions for, to keep actually, I'm just going to not even get into that right now. It really sucked. So see that younger version of yourself as scared and going through a really hard time, and just have some compassion on yourself. I'll see you again.